Sean here. It is time now for the Revelstoke Mayor Report with Mayor Gary Sauls. Good morning, Gary.
Good morning, Sean.
I know you missed me. It's hard.
Yeah, I know.
It's a hard life to miss your favorite personality / media member.
So it was either come here or go to Victoria.
Yeah.
Right?
So we will be talking about your trip to Victoria, but I wanted to ask you a question first.
Sure.
Okay. Before we get into the political arena, some time ago there was lots of hubbub about what was going on with the Revelstoke Forum. Lori had put out our concerns about the roof, and there was a 3-option tier, but the tier was really just an explanation of cost of what it could be. It didn't necessarily mean we were picking one of those. It was just, this is what it could be.
Yeah,
correct?
And so the reason that came forward is there was a chance of applying for a grant to redo the roof. And so basically it was, here's the options. We can rebuild the roof. We can do a few other things. We can build a new facility, that sort of thing. All of those things cost money. The grant only goes for replacing or refurbishing the roof. So I believe we've applied for that grant. I haven't heard anything further as to where we are with that.
Okay, so as far as you know, the idea was just to replace the roof and not to rebuild or tear down or move down to the sewage lagoon or whatever.
Yeah, so if there are other options, so if we get the grant, we will basically talk about in council what we do. Do we go forward with that grant? What's the value of replacing that roof? Or do we go to the community and say, hey, what do you want us to do? Do you want a new facility? If you need a new facility, then it's going to be totally on the taxpayers, and whatever that cost is.
Yeah, you got to get the grant first to know what the difference would be.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? We haven't got that. Okay, so that's where we're at with that. We're still waiting for word on how much money they'd be willing to give us to begin with.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, you were going to come in for last Friday, but you went down to Victoria to go kick it with Horgan.
We did, and Horgan.
What's he like? Like we'll get into the BS about. Okay, so really, what's John like? Because he kind of reminds me of your working class hero. But I mean,
here's the reality: we get down there, Horgan's not there. He's not there, and there was no guarantee that he was going to be there. So we thought that we'd at least get a chance to see Mr. Donaldson and present the petition to him. End result was the place was almost vacant, and Horgan was in the Okanagan, I understand, handing out money for emergency services. And then, of course, the pipeline thing came down, and he basically was now trying to deal with what the repercussions were with that. So what happened was we did some interviews down there. We did some videos. We spent a day with MLA Greg Kylo. Our MLA Doug Klobuchar was back in our riding here and doing some work here. So on the Tuesday after our visit, both MLA Doug Klobuchar and Greg Kylo presented our 12,000 signature petition to the House. So Mr. Horgan and Mr. Donaldson were able to receive that in person there. And so now I understand through social media, MLA Klobuchar has set up a phone conversation where Horgan will speak to both Mayor Rice and I for an hour dealing with the caribou issue.
It's kind of a bust going all the way down there, though.
Well, it is, but the bonus was that we were actually able to deliver that in person. That was something that we wanted to do. Both Mayor Rice and myself were supposed to be in Quebec this week for FCM. He's in Quebec doing his thing. We were hoping to meet with some federal ministers, and because of some issues here in Revelstoke, I stayed behind to care for our community.
Okay, so today was technically the 31st, so it's the deadline for any final comments or how people's concerns. Am I not correct?
That's my understanding. Correct.
Okay, but come tomorrow there won't be some sort of resolve. But from what I'm reading, nationally, that the feds are just on them.
Yep.
On them.
Yep.
Like it's almost as if do you have any concerns really? We've talked at the EDC meetings, and it just feels like one of those typical, holy crap, they are on them. It's like they're waiting to put it under Sarah.
Yeah, they are. That's what it appears from my perspective. So we've asked, and our understanding is that we'll actually be able to sit at the table during the herd plans so that we can actually look after our own resources here in the community. So that's kind of what we've been asking all along. It seems to be going that way now. But until I actually have that conversation with Mr. Horgan and know for sure that indeed they're going to let us sit at the table, I've spoke to biologists here in the community who were part of the planning that was done in the 90s. So they're basically saying, ask for that, push that, because we need to have our decisions made locally, and then we can actually manage our own resources here.
I'm imagining that the North piece is asking the same thing.
Yep. They've put together some agreements up there. Some of the First Nations people who were not included in the agreements are now saying, hey, wait, what about us? And so because of the federal infrastructure basically saying, listen, we want to do reconciliation with these bands, now those bands are getting noticed. Our local bands here, the Shuswap, the Splatseen, Swapmek, all of the bands in this area have not been consulted. So Chief Christian has basically said, nobody spoke to me about it. So we'll see what happens as we go forward.
Okay, so we're at the beginning of the first deadline. We'll see how it goes rolling forward. Now, I know that you're not allowed to talk about some things due to legalities reasons, and some things haven't been settled. So I don't even really see the point in drilling you about it, because whatever, we already know, and we're just you'll find a resolve and we'll move on from it. The question is that, so it was posted up on the Mountaineer that we've got Don that's stepping in as CIO for an interim period.
Correct.
Because it's a short notice thing. You have to fill the gap, and you can't just pull somebody, I'm assuming. I'll tell you this is my theory. If you found somebody from, say, Fort St. John, and you're like, well, he's going to fill in for X amount of time, we would all go, who the hell is he, and why is he coming from Fort St. John? What does he know what's going on in our community? And buck.
There's things that happen in municipal politics that need to be dealt with. So we've set Don up temporarily as interim CAO and approving officer. So there's things that need to be signed off, subdivision documents. We have building officials coming in on contract basis next week. We have 2 of our planning staff back off their leave. So we're actually a little behind, but we're running forward. This past week, we also amended a bylaw, so those who are building houses and have engineered plans can carry on with their engineering signing off rather than having the building inspector come. So processes are continuing, and this council has been dedicated to basically looking at it and saying, how do we streamline things? How do we make it work for the community, but also mitigate the risks for the corporation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always going to be sarcastic and joking, but my guess on this is because things need to continue to move as fast as they can in the midst of some molasses, and that Dawn knows what's going on a regular basis, and it makes the most logical sense.
Yeah, she's a corporate officer, so she's well aware of the processes and how things are going, and so for her, it's just stepping into that role. So now she's doing 2 jobs as she moves forward for the interim here, and once we know what we're doing and deal with the on leave, and then we'll move forward.
Okay, and once that's settled, it'll probably be a non-disclosure agreement, and then it'll just be moving forward.
And I'm not going to comment on any of those.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
I wanted to ask you a bit about the engineering thing, because again, I'm not building anything, but from what I gathered previously, like Aaron had written, or I can't, it was on the Mountaineer in regards that we can now have somebody outside of the city engineer.
What happens with a lot of building, depending on the type of building, the drawings are already engineered. They're done by an architect, or they're done by an engineer who has a seal in that type of construction. And they basically will have done the drawings up. They say, okay, we've got everything organized. We know what the building code is. Everything's good to go.
So like Glenn.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'm not sure Glenn has those accreditations, but so engineers who have construction accreditations will basically do up the drawings. They'll have everything. They're able to sign off. They can follow the process and be on scene or on the site of the construction as things go forward. Then it doesn't put building inspection needed right? So they can just go forward. So some contractors have already told me, listen, I engineer absolutely everything. I'm going forward. I don't need to stop. So we've changed the bylaw to actually accommodate them. They've got their abilities to go forward legally, and it's safe, and we know that everything's going to be done correctly.
Okay, so that's that. And we had some staff on leave, but now they're back.
Yep. So we had 2 planners away on leave. They're back in the fold. They were back the beginning of this week or end of last week. And now they're basically running with the projects that they had before they went on leave.
Okay, and we are still looking for Dan's replacement.
That's correct. We've got an RFP out there for 2 building inspectors, one for building services manager and one for a general building inspector.
And here's a question you might not be able to answer just because you might not know, and it's not a dig. It's just, have you seen the same position being requested in other markets?
Yes.
Okay.
There is a shortage of building inspectors across the province.
Really?
And so...
so kids, you hear that? That's what you need to move into, apparently.
That's exactly it. Right. They can kind of pick and choose where they want to go.
Okay, so you're looking at the how much are you going to get paid, and then again, of course, the cost of living. It might be a little bit more enticing elsewhere just because of that.
Yep.
Okay, so I'm sure there'll be lots more to fill us in on as the weeks go along. And Gary, come up and keep telling us.
All right, thanks.